note?
Yeah, I can read it.
Perfect, thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Library Advisory Board meeting. We are glad you are here, but we get started. A few housekeeping items. Due to recent changes to Oregon public meeting law, our meeting will be now recorded. Once the video is processed by the city web team, it will be published on our board web page for public viewing. All the public attendees are invited to participate in the meeting at the designated opportunities. If you would like to make a comment or a question, use the raise hand function on Zoom to indicate so, and we will unmute your microphone for you to share. You can also use the chat feature at any time or submit a question using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, so we'll start off with introductions. So say your name and say something about a library that you'd either really want to go to or have been to and why you thought it was neat. The Beaverton Library doesn't count. Pick a different one. Just to be fair. So I'll start. I think that I've been to the Library of Congress in DC and I thought it was really cool. It's a huge library. It's got all sorts of artwork everywhere. And I'm Andrew Love, the chair. All right, and next up, we'll just go around my screen so it'll look kind of random. Araceli.
Hi, yeah, my name's Araceli, and I'm the youth outreach specialist at the library. A different library I visited recently was in Boston, and the architecture was incredible. Yeah, I can't remember the exact name of it. I just know it was in Boston. But yeah, so I totally recommend. It was beautiful.
Great. Glenn?
I'm Glenn Ferdman, the Beaverton City Library Director. And Araceli, based on your description, it sounds like you were at the Boston Central Library, the McKim building, which is the original building, which is just stunning architecturally from both the outside and the inside. So I can attest to that, having spent several years there, living and working there. A library that I'd like to visit that I haven't visited, to my shame, I think, and regret, is the Central Library of the New York Public Library, which also has a phenomenal, beautiful, and outstanding reading room.
Neat. Mei. You're muted, Mei.
Yeah, hello, I'm Mei. Just back from Hong Kong. And during the time I went to a main library in Hong Kong. But once I step out from the library, I received a message from the government that I need to have a COVID test. And the library closed up till now.
Oh my gosh.
But luckily, I was not committed by COVID.
Wow.
So, just to share my special experience in Hong Kong and the main library.
All right, thanks, Mei. AdriAnne?
Hi, can you hear me all?
Yep.
Cool. Well, I haven't really visited many libraries outside of being a patron or working at one, but my favorite library was one that I've worked at before. It's the Saddlebrook Library, and it's in Omaha, Nebraska. And during the school day, it was part of it was a school library, and then they had this bookcase that would turn to open up when the kids were out of school, and then it was largely the children's section, and then it would open up the whole library when the bookcase revolved. So the adult area and the youth area was always open during the day, but during the school day, the kids area was shut off by a bookcase. And I thought that was kind of cool. But a library I would want to visit is one on the East Coast, like the New York, or one of the ones at London, I think had a really cool library that I'd want to visit, one of theirs.
Cathy.
Hi, I'm Cathy, and actually a library I've been meaning to go to is the one up in Vancouver, just over the border in Washington. I've heard it's a beautiful library, so I'd love to go there sometime soon.
Perfect. Arvin.
Hi, I'm Arvin. And I'd probably want to go to maybe take the same one as Andrew, Library of Congress. I've been on the outside of it, but never been inside at all.
Perfect. Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria, the Community Engagement Manager at the library. I think I'll go with Vancouver, British Columbia. That library has pretty awesome architecture. Also, I have been to the Library of Congress for 20 minutes, and I used that 20 minutes to get a Library of Congress library card. So that's a mistake.
Neat. Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, I was going to say the library, the public library in New York, but another one that I've always wanted to go to, which is less likely than the New York Library, is the Library of Parliament in Ottawa. It looks absolutely beautiful. So I know that we go for more than just looks, but just taking that in is an experience in itself. So I would love to see that.
Awesome. And Sara.
Hey, I'm Sara. And I have visited LA Library, which is more beautiful and having a big area for the children's section when I visited. It was cool. And I want to visit the library which borders the US and Canada. So that when you're in the library, you step that side, it's Canada, and this side, it's United States. So it's in the Vermont, Derby, Vermont. So I just want to visit there.
Sounds neat. And actually, Kristen, I think you're the last person.
Hi, thanks. Hi, I'm Kristen Fiddler. I'm the administrative assistant for the library. One of my most special library moments was unexpected. I was doing a tour of the Opera House in Paris, the old Opera House, and there was a room that was a library, and it had all the librettos, and it was beautiful. That's like my favorite library moment outside of my Beaverton City Library, which there are so many favorite library moments there all the time.
Great. That's why that one didn't count. I didn't want to.
Though any library, our favorite library is like Beaverton Library. As he said, you travel anywhere, home is the place you come back. So it's like Beaverton Library.
Yes. All right. Now that we've got that, I think next up is approving the minutes. If the board's had a chance to look at the minutes from last time and have anything to add or are good with it.
You want a motion, Andrew?
Yes. Yes. Sorry. I'd like is there a motion to approve the minutes?
You can see me.
Sara, yeah, I see you. And anyone to second?
I'll second.
Okay. And then I think all who approve. All right. And then per our voting thing, Kristen?
The vote is unanimous to approve the minutes as written.
Excellent. All right. So it looks like we don't have anybody in the public. I'm gonna jump things around a little bit, and Arvin, if you're ready, I know that you have to leave early, so we'll just do the teen library one first.
Okay. So I have a few points to touch on, mostly just events that's going to be taking place in the next few months. So our first events are like the Kids Craft Fair. That's happening April 9th, I think. April 9th. And that's what we'll be participating in. I think more details are to come for that. And then we'll do also the free comic book day. Didn't happen last year because of COVID. But we'll be taking part in that one. That's happening May 7th. We'll also be doing the science, like helping out with the Science Geek Out Fest. That one, TBD, more details come out soon. We'll be doing a few like photo contests. I think the topic is book art this year. And then we'll do the poetry contest. We'll be judging that soon in April. And then as for the podcast, basically just going well. We're going to do a new recording in a few weeks. But yeah, all the same, and a few more events coming in a few months.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Arvin?
I have a question and a comment. First of all, it sounds like a very full plate of events. So congratulations on that and good luck with all of them. And I'm curious if you have any information on how the submissions for the photo contest are coming. I understand that you guys are collecting them, I think, all month, right?
I think it's online. I don't remember exactly what was last year, but I'm pretty sure the way that we did it, for the poetry contest and for the writing one, we just get it sent to Google Drive and then we judge it. Ian will go through all of them and then we'll pick out a few, like 20, 30 of them, and then we'll kind of judge them that way.
Okay, great. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Arvin? All right, thanks, Arvin. In that case, I'd like to move ahead to the children's and teen areas, but I'd check in with Counselor Mitchell. Is that okay if we do that first, or do you have to leave early?
I was going to leave early, but I can do it after that. No problem.
Okay, I just don't know how long our review will be. So if you want to go first.
Okay, yeah, if you don't mind. I have this headache and I need to pick up my medicine and it is just killing me. So thank you for allowing that. So not a lot has really gone, I mean, actually, let me say this, a ton has gone on since we've seen each other last, but as far as the most notable and most impactful, high profile wise, we had a great discussion last night about the school resource officers. And so we are partnering with the Beaverton School District, which is really unusual for two elected bodies to come together to really, have this collective goal, especially it's so emotionally charged and there's so many people that have a strong stake in the situation. So it really speaks volumes about our ability to really care about our city. You know, everybody's egos are aside and we say, how do we come together collectively to provide, for our city? So it's really exciting. So I think, really what we covered last night was the comprehensive overview, just some very thoughtful and considerate questions. What is it that our SROs do? It's going to be very student-centered. So it's going to be about their experience, which is what it should be about. So it's really great because we're not only focusing on the people who are affected, we're giving them a say. And, we're coming together and we're saying, okay, what does this mean? And so I think that we have all the right tools. We've got great people in charge of, gathering the data, and really hopeful for something that I have to honestly say I've been very much dreading because of the emotional charged piece of it. It is very hard to really power through a constructive conversation when you have so much emotion. And why wouldn't you? You've got children, you've got people you love and care about. There's so much more than just a business hat on when it comes to this particular side of things. So I think that everybody is coming with a very refreshed sense of, being able to get this done and wanting to, which is the biggest piece. And, I spoke up last night and said, I'm really glad that we're coming from this angle because I do not want to make a change in Beaverton just because someone else did. That's not what we're here for. We're not here to cut and copy, what someone else did. Like, we need to see what it is that we need. And so I think it's going to be great. Any questions about that, or Glenn?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment, Counselor, on what you said. I remember to your point about the two elected bodies coming together, the consultant that's been hired to lead this process stated as much, and how unique and remarkable it is that you have two elected bodies coming together to do this work collectively, and how rare that is. I wasn't aware that that was the case, but it was really noteworthy that she took the time to mention that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, when you really think about elected bodies, everybody has some sort of authoritative right to do whatever they want. And honestly, the school district truly could do whatever they want. There's no recourse. I mean, we are a funding mechanism for them, but they could still raise their hand and say, nope, not working out, and then people could shift and say, well, now city council, what are you going to do about it? And instead, it's like, why don't we come together and see collectively that it'll just be easier right out of the gate and showing that we really care. I mean, we've definitely dealt with a lot of elected bodies in our region that are like, too bad, so sad. And this is not that, so that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions or any concerns about that or anything, because I will not be at next month's meeting, please feel free to reach out anytime.
So any other questions for Councilor Mitchell?
Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Councilor. Feel better.
All right. So skipping over everything else so that we can get to the Children's and Teens Area Use Policy. Everyone should have a copy of it from an email from Kristen and had a chance to review it. I think we'll hand it over to the library staff. You might have some slides or something to show us.
Hi. My name is AdriAnne. I work in Access at the Beaverton branch, and I have Araceli with me as well. We are from the library's Anti-Racism Action Committee. Victoria is here with us as well, and then our goals in this group is to help, one of them is to help review policies using an equity lens. And part of how we do this is by using our little equity everyday card. We also have ones in the staff room, and we've done scavenger hunts with them before where staff have to find it and they get like a free Jolly Rancher mint. So we've slowly been rolling it out to staff. And part of it asks these 3 questions, one of which is whose voice is and isn't represented in this decision? Who does this decision benefit and who does it burden? And does this decision close or widen access gaps? And that's in, not just policies, but in everyday interactions with the public as well. So it can be used multiple decision-making processes. And one of our goals are for library policies to reflect and foster a welcoming space for everyone in the community, while also learning from and successfully engaging with that community. And everyone, if anyone doesn't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Araceli because she's going to do our proposal changes or go over that.
Any questions for AdriAnne before Araceli starts? All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Adri. So I will share the screen. I know you all got a copy, but just to make it easy and we can all go through it together visually. So let me just pull it up real quick. All right. Oh, hold on a minute. I switched screens. I didn't like that. Okay, can you all see it okay?
If you could zoom it in a bit more, that'd be great.
How's that?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so as Adri mentioned, we're from the Anti-Racism Action Committee, and I'll just go over some of our proposed changes. But before I do that, I just wanted to quickly share that we really wanted, as we were reviewing this, we were focusing on what's the purpose of this policy, and that is to define who can use these areas. So just something to keep in mind as we go over these changes, these suggested changes. So the first one is just a little change in language. Instead of noise level, we decided to change that to activity. And that was actually based on a recommendation from a manager, just reminding us that we also allow people to eat and drink at the library, well, pre-pandemic. And there's other activities as well that take place in these areas. It's not just about noise level. So that's why that's there. And then here we changed during developmental delays. That has a negative connotation to it. And we felt that a more appropriate term was disabilities. So that's why we went with that. And then for this last bullet that we completely decided to remove, that is because, well, it has 2 parts. One, it is already covered in the Safe Child policy, and it's not related to who can use this room. So we just felt like it wasn't necessary. So we removed it from there. And then as we go down into the teen area, just making the language the same, changing noise level to activity. And then we remove this section here because behavior is covered in rules for use and is addressed there. So, and I also feel like this sentence here already kind of defines the behavior we're looking for. So I felt like it kind of was reiterating. So there's that. And then the last piece here is removing the ID requirement language. And that is because that is more procedural based versus policy based. And we also did have a discussion within this group around how that can create barrier to access for youth. So we also shared that with programming staff and reference staff at the library, and they're going to have a deeper discussion around that and what procedures may or may not change. And so that same thing we removed from above goes here. And then this last piece, we also decided to remove just because we didn't feel it was necessary to have there as we're focusing on this policy, just focusing on who can use this room. So that is pretty much it. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all.
Does anyone else have any questions? Sarah?
Yeah. In the child area, the second paragraph, it says if a student is in 6th grade or above, they should be directed to the teen area. So if there is a family with the 6th graders or above, and then they want to stay together in the children area with the little kids, what will be their choice?
Yeah, that is fine. Like if they're in there as a family, that's completely fine. We just have that in there to suggest to teen, hey, we also have the teen room upstairs, that teen area, in case you would like to go there. And so there's more access to computers and other resources just for teens. So. Victoria, do you want to elaborate on that? Am I missing anything?
It's more focused for, we do sometimes get some teens that want to hang out in children's and just directing them to their age appropriate area. So that has, like Araceli said, families can of course take that. Thank you, Sarah.
So would it make sense to put teens and adults maybe in the room to look for library materials or to ask a question, or is it already clear?
Could you share your screen again, Araceli, so we can?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it was up here. The student.
Yeah, that one where it says adults may be in the room to look for, like, would it make sense for teens and adults maybe in the room to do things?
I'm just going to add that as a potential edit. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, on the continuation of that, as you said, the staff will make the exception as appropriate. So it can be applicable for the, as I mentioned, for the families. So it's not only for the, the accommodation for children and adults with disabilities. So I don't know, maybe a comma, or I don't know how to make that sentence together, all together for the above paragraph. See, this is not only in order to make accommodation, not only for accommodation, any circumstances or anything that it's flexible for the families that are there. So the staff is the deciding authority, or who is going to make the exception there for any flexible or any accommodation that the family needs.
It was a little bit hard for me to hear you, just slightly because of audio, but
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, there's just a little bit of an echo, so I don't get to hear your full sentence before I hear another sound, but go ahead.
So in the last paragraph, you have mentioned in order to make accommodation for children and adults with disability, the staff will make exceptions as appropriate. I just want that sentence, the staff will make exception as appropriate for any circumstances. It's not like only for the disability or only. So as I mentioned before, it is like a 6th grader and a toddler are available for a family and you make an exception there. So in the same way, if there is any accommodation needed, there is an exception. So where the staff can make any exception based on the family needs or family needs. That's what I want to make sure, not only for children and adults with disabilities. Whatever the circumstances, we are supporting the family.
Go ahead. I wonder if it would be better to address the family part up higher. The one of the reasons for this in order sentence is, for example, from the school district, we would have adults visit us and, you know, use the kids' computers and things like that. And sometimes families would, or parents would ask us about that. So like, I feel like that sentence is very important in protecting that group. But I see your point about families, Sarah. And so maybe changing the wording in that bullet and maybe sentence 2 would be more inclusive of the teen and the family. Like if a student is in 6th grade or above and not with their family or something like that, right? That separates and keeps the family unit together. That makes sense.
You can, I don't know how to frame a sentence, but I'm just like, in order to make accommodation for children and adults with disabilities and other circumstances as family needs, the staff will make exceptions as appropriate. I might be wrong in the grammar and things. Just I'm giving an idea, then you can modify the vocabulary and things and make it however you want it to.
So I think maybe the wording is the first sentence. It could be the study tables are reserved for children from toddler to 5th grade, their families, and those assisting them.
Or you could say reserved for families with children.
Yeah, thank you.
Like just add in family. I think that's what Sarah's trying to say. She just wants to be sure that families are included in that. If I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I think it's just making sure that families are included somewhere in the first, in that bullet somewhere, to just show that if the family group wants to stick together, they're not instructed to go elsewhere.
Yeah,
Sarah, does that address? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I have been taking notes. And we can definitely go back and reword some of this. So yeah, thank you all.
Okay, I just want to close the loop with Sarah. Sarah, does that address your concerns?
Yeah, Glenn.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else with the children's section? Any other comments about that? All right. Does anyone have any comments about the teen section? I have. Actually, I have one question about children. Are there supplies in the children's area? And if so, should you take that bullet from teen and add it to children, or are there no children's supplies to borrow or anything?
The supplies are of de minimis value.
So you're not worried about it. It's not borrowed.
Correct.
In the children's area.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Yeah, then I guess we're good for children. Then teen questions. Just a comment. I'm glad that you have adults and children are in there to look for library materials or ask a question at the desk. I know that's come up in a previous board meeting where we were trying to figure out how to make sure that adults could browse in the teen area without feeling like they needed to go to the adult area. So I know that's been brought up, and it looks great the way it's worded.
Thank you, Andrew.
Any other comments from anybody else about the teen section? Sara, Mei, Cathy?
I think I'm good.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for your time and your comments. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have another pair of eyes on it for sure. Yeah, Glenn? Yeah,
before Araceli, before you and Adri and Victoria leave, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. The board is on the same page with respect to next steps. So we've heard some suggestions regarding changes to the policy. I believe Araceli, we're taking notes. So we'll go back and update the policy. Would it be sufficient, Andrew, and for the rest of the board, for us to furnish the revised version of that via email? Or would you like us to, I don't know if the board can, assuming the board needs to vote on it, I don't think that vote can happen via email. So what I guess needs to happen is we make the changes, then we bring it back next month for the board to vote on them, correct?
Yes. So you make the changes, and you can send that to us over email. And if anyone has any questions, they can always reply to that. And then on next month, we can make a motion to approve or do any other votes we need to do once you have the more finalized version without your edits.
Yes.
Okay. So Team Beaverton Library, does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we will put it on our agenda to ratify or not next month, based on
Wonderful.
How we like it.
Great.
So before the library team gets to go, thank you for everything. I'm glad you guys were able to join in. Any further questions for them before they get to, I guess, go home? All right. In that case, thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you. Guys. Bye. Have a good meeting.
Thanks. All right. So I believe that means that we'll move on our agenda. We'll jump back into order, and we'll get back to partner reports. So Beaverton Library Foundation, do we have anything for that, Glenn?
Yes, I can provide that update, Andrew.
Perfect.
And thank you again for being so accommodating with respect to the order of the agenda. Do have some updates to share about the Library Foundation, which met last week. They are on a first Wednesday of the month schedule, whereas the Library Advisory Board meets the second Wednesday, the Foundation meets the first Wednesday. So they met last week, and so two things that relate to one another. One is we provided an update, a rough estimate, and this is significant, on the amount of money that was raised from the fall appeal letter, we believe to be in the neighborhood of $10,000. And when I say estimate, that's because the Foundation Board has been without a treasurer now for more than a year. The good news is that at that same meeting, the board voted in 2 new members plus a new treasurer. So going forward, the board will have much more accurate accounting of their funds, whether they be fund balances for their accounts, their bank accounts, because they have several of those, and or also the amount that they're bringing in via various campaigns. And here I have to give a shout out and a thank you to Zach Wagman, who is our volunteer program coordinator, for his efforts in helping us recruit those 2 new members and the new treasurer for the board. So it's very gratifying to see the increase in membership of that board and giving them the capacity to make progress on their goals in support of the library. They also, and then finally, two more things. Speaking of recruitments, we are currently in the process to recruit a secretary for the foundation. That's another much needed officer position. And we advertised for that need in the most recent issue of the Volunteer Verb, which some of you may have seen, which I believe as Library Advisory Board members, you're technically volunteers and so should receive copies of that. If you don't, please let me know and I'll make sure that Zach adds you to the mailing list. And then lastly, the board approved a request in the amount of, I believe it was $28,000 and a letter of support for a Library Services and Technology Act grant, which is a federally funded grant that we're applying for, subject to council approval, which we hope will happen next week, to acquire a mini bookmobile and also a limited duration half-time outreach specialist to literally drive the bookmobile and deliver services on behalf of underserved portions of the city.
Awesome. Any questions for Glenn about just the foundation? Cool. All right, then if our subcommittee on the new friends could make their report, that would be delightful. I don't know which of you actually went, so turning it over to you guys.
Alrighty, I was the first one to attend. So Sara, Kathleen and I are on the subcommittee for attending the new library, to attend the new friends meetings. And so they were very welcoming, very kind. And it was nice to meet everybody. So they have one position open on their board. So they were looking for a new board member. And it sounds like their operations manager was leaving. So they were kind of looking to restructure. And it was suggested that they move maybe to a co-manager model instead of doing an operations manager model. And that was kind of a separate something that they discussed after the meeting. So they're kind of, sounds like restructuring their organization of how they're going to do things. But overall, last year, financial things went great. They had an all-time high revenue of $162,000. Their retail store beat their kind of expected or their goals by 40%. So things are looking really great there. Amazon had an all-time high of $83,000 for their sales there. They also sell through Abe Books and eBay. Interesting thing, they sold a signed copy of Dune on eBay for $1,200. So that was pretty impressive. And apparently that was just because it wasn't an original, like a first edition or something like that, but somebody donated it. It was a signed copy and they got $1,200 off of eBay for just that one book. So that was pretty cool, I thought.
Wow.
Yeah. So they talked about the big library sale that they had in the fall, that was a huge success. And they're looking to do more frequent, smaller sales coming up. In fact, they might have one that they're doing in April, possibly. It was kind of a tentative date. So in terms of volunteers, they have 50 regularly scheduled volunteers who come in. They're getting a ton of books donated right now. In fact, they kind of during January's meeting, they were saying they'd put a pause on donations in the store because I guess in December alone, they got 11,000 books donated. So they were just kind of up to their eyeballs in books. So it sounds like everything's going really good. There was also talk of them possibly doing pop-up sales in the library lobby to kind of sell some more items. I don't think that was finalized. That was just something they were talking about. And then they also mentioned that their website, I don't know if they revamped their website or if it's an all new website. But I was looking it over today and I think it's a really cute website. It's bookcornerbeaverton.org. So that to me, I just checked it out today and kind of looked at it. It was pretty neat to go through and see the things that they've got doing. Sounds like they're doing great. So any questions about new friends and how they're doing?
That's phenomenal news, Cathy.
I know. I couldn't believe the signed copy of Dune. I was just like, that's awesome. So And somebody else said, you know, that you probably could have gotten more. And they said, well, you know, we just looked at that for the value that it was. That was the low number. So that's what they put it as, and it sold like that. So pretty awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, so any questions for Cathy? If not, Cathy, Sara, how's the subcommittee working out? Any problems?
No, we have only a conflict in the month of December. And thank you, Kristen, for your input.
Yeah, we kind of put together a schedule. So we're just going to rotate through, each of us taking a different month, and I think it'll work out well.
All right, perfect. Since this is our first subcommittee that I'm aware of, so I'm glad it's working out.
I have a follow-up question on this new friends, because this I'm attending the meeting. And what are the things that we can share with them from the library at the meeting? So share, don't share, kind of things. So if you let me know what I can share with them, I can do it.
Glenn, do you have insight onto that?
Yeah, I think, Sara, anything from the director's report that gets shared at the advisory board meeting is fair game. And of course, anything that you see on the library website, whether it be about upcoming programs and events or anything else, is certainly fair game and worthy of sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing that.
Perfect. Anything else about the new friends? Okay. I have a weird question for you guys. Were there old friends?
Oh, this is a great question. Okay. So, and Kristen, jump in if I misspeak, and I'll ask you to add anything when I finish. My understanding is that there used to be a Friends of the Beaverton City Library organization, and that group developed some inner conflict and was disbanded, and a new group was founded in its stead. And I don't know if it was a requirement of the state when they filled out their charter as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, or not to be confused with the previous organization, but the new group rebranded themselves the New Friends of the Beaverton City Library. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to probably correct what I said.
No, you nailed it. That's exactly my understanding of how that happened. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I just was always wondering, and I never remembered to ask. All right. I think that closes out our partner reports because we've heard from Arvin. Thanks again, Arvin. So we'll move on to new business. I think first up is the 2023 budget, Glenn. And yeah. I don't know if the city council report is also something we need to discuss, if that's part of it or if that's separate.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last point about the city council report?
Us reporting to the city council, is that part of the budget or is that a separate thing?
Oh, I see. The presentation, the annual report of this board to the city council?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that would be separate from the budget. Okay,
then let's go ahead with the budget.
Okay, very good.
Before moving on, I have a question for the board. I believe and read in the Beaverton City Library website, website that library board members are 7 members of a team. And now we are 5. So is there any recruitment for the other 2, or it's alternate, or this is the way we are going to go forward?
So the mid recruitment, I believe, starts up in March. And so they'll start putting out a bunch of feelers for recruiting new library members of the board. And I think then we do interviews and things, and probably we'll have them by May or June. presuming that we have a bunch of people who apply. Does that match up, Glenn? I think that's what it is.
Yes. If memory serves, I think I may have included information in the director's report about that process. Let me just check real quick. Well, actually, I think I may have sent it to you, Andrew, in an email message, but essentially, yeah, there's a midterm recruitment process that allows boards and commissions such as this one to recruit for members either that they may have lost either due to attrition or other factors. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the application.
I found the email, Glenn, with the date.
Wonderful.
So the applications are the March, April, your city, it'll show up that we're looking for new people, and here's how you apply. The application deadline is March 13th. And then by March 28th or 30th, they'll start doing interviews. The mayor makes the final recommendations on April 1st. And it looks like the council and everything will get their approvals and whatnot in April. So the expected start date of these new members would be our May meeting.
Okay.
But yes, we'd want to get a full board.
Yeah, that's what mine.
So what I will do is speak to Zach, our volunteer program coordinator, and ask him if there is another issue of the volunteer verb that is coming out prior to the end of the application deadline to put something in, and I'll send him some suggested text to recruit for new library advisory board members.
Oh, that sounds great. Because the volunteer verb definitely comes out more often than the EuroCity newsletter.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so moving on to the budget. The fiscal year 23, which is next year, which begins July 1, budget process has begun. It's a pretty quick turnaround in schedule. So for instance, and the way that the finance department divvies it up is the first week, the line items and justifications are due, which were submitted on January the 28th, which was their due date. The following week, a week later, what's called the wage data, essentially all the salary information for every department was due. So we submitted that by last Friday. And on the 18th of this month, the library goals and objectives and the narrative section is due. Having said that, during the budget kickoff meetings, which occurred in early January, the city's finance director pointed out that due to decreased revenue as a result of the pandemic, things like reductions or decreases in the amount that the city collected from gasoline tax because people were driving less as a result of the pandemic, hotel and lodging tax because people weren't traveling as much, permitting fees, there wasn't as much development happening, etc., have created a budget gap in the city's budget. What's called the general fund. Those of you who were present when Patrick gave his presentation to this board, remember, basically there's two funds, main funds of the city. One is called the general fund, which is all these city departments come underneath that umbrella of the general fund with one exception, and that's the library. The library being unique because we're special, right? Because we're the library. We have our own fund, and in fact, it's called the library fund. The thing is, the library fund actually gets its revenue from the general fund. So we're separate, but we're also attached. And so in the past, when the library fund has been short on revenue, because our revenue sources are the same as the rest of the city, and typically those shortages show up in what's called our contingency budget, which the council, it's essentially two months of operating budget that the council requires each department, each fund to set aside in the event of an emergency, such as a global pandemic. That for the library is generally about $700,000 to $800,000 minimum, which is where the council likes to see us at, and probably around 1.2 million if possible. So in the past, when we've been short, and the reasons for that, and historically that has been the case as a result of the following factors. So every year the library receives approximately 3% increase from the county, which is where the majority of our funding actually comes from, is the county, not the city. But 60%, 55 to 60% of the library's funds revenue actually comes from the county in the form of 60% of that 60% comes from the county's general fund, their own general fund, operating fund. 40% of that 60% comes from the local levy option. And those of you who are Beaverton residents, assume, I think all of you are, may recall voting back in May 2020, and hopefully you voted to approve the local levy option for the Washington County Cooperative Library Services. That's where 40% of our 60% of the funds that we receive from the county comes from. So the county, due to increases in property taxes, gives each of its member libraries an additional 3% in allocation per year. However, that is not enough, historically has not been enough to keep pace with things like cost of living increases for our staff, step increases, which are increases in the amount that they receive per paycheck based on seniority and other factors, as well as other commitments to staff, various things. And so consequently, historically, we have been short in our, what's called our beginning fund balance, which is comprised of our contingency budget and our trust funds and other things like how much we anticipate receiving from the Friends and so on and so forth. So in the past, the city has, in such cases, allocated a greater percentage of the funds, the tax revenue that it receives, towards the library fund to help us fill that gap. Well, this year, because the general fund also has a gap in their revenue, it's not going to be as easy to fill the gap in the library fund. So consequently, all of the city departments, including the library, were asked to, when submitting their next year's budget, to come in at or below last year's level when it comes to our individual line items, things like training, when it comes to materials, supplies, furniture, equipment, etc. And then personnel costs, again, because of commitments made in the collective bargaining agreement, the city has to make good on those promises by providing cost of living increases and step increases. For certain cost of living increases, I'm not sure about the step increases, come to think of it. So that said, we did submit our budget in or below last year's level. And it'll probably be another week or so before we hear back from the finance department, having crunched all the numbers from all the various departments, where exactly we're at. And in fact, how big of a gap is there between where we're at in terms of our budget as submitted versus where we need to be in terms of our beginning working capital fund balance and our contingency fund balance. So I'll have more information to share with the board next month. One thing we were advised is that with respect to any vacant positions, that is one area where the city is going to be looking very closely in terms of whether or not to fill any of those vacant positions, and or if they're going to we receive permission to fill them, there may be delays in the timing in order to save additional funds. So for instance, if you delay hiring someone until December, you don't hire them immediately in July, but you just delay a few months, let's say into September, October, or further, each month that you delay the hiring represents additional funds in our budget. Thanks, Arvin. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
So with that, I'm going to pause because I know I've thrown a lot of information at the board to see if you have any questions about anything that I've shared thus far.
I had a question.
I think Mei was first, Cathy, and then you.
Right.
So in that case, will it affect the annual staff salary increase? Because of the inflation, I think it's would be any bad effect, or will just frozen their salary?
Yeah, so with respect to cost of living increases, so that is a contractual agreement between the city and the union. And I believe the contracted amount, well, actually, I think that was tied into inflation. So whatever the inflationary figure is, that's the amount that the city is obligated to provide per contract. So in so doing, of course, that will help members of the union, apart from management who are not union members, that will help their salaries keep pace with inflation. As far as those employees who are not members of the union, there is no contractual obligation between the city and management as a whole. There may be individual contractual agreements per individual contracts that the city has signed with individual managers, but of which I'm not aware, but I can attest that there is no contractual agreement between the city and folks at the manager level to provide a increase that's commensurate with inflation.
Thanks.
So, Cathy?
I'm trying to remember, there's a name for the funds that the federal government
Yes,
out.
ARPA funds.
Yes, and I was wondering if any of the ARPA funds could be used to help with this gap that you're talking about.
Yes, so I'm putting on my attorney's hat. I'll provide the legal answer. That depends. So the city has been allocated approximately $16 million in ARPA funds. And actually between CARES Act funds and ARPA funds, it's actually $21 million, I learned today. $16 million in ARPA funds. $5 million of those funds have already been earmarked and accounted for, which leaves about $11 million. Now, could the city apply that $1 million to the budget shortfall? 100%. That said, that is subject to city council approval. They have based on a new form of government, city council has the legal authority and responsibility to determine how the city expends its funds, including any funds that come from external sources, such as the federal government. So I know that's something that the council is discussing and debating. And I imagine that just based on the circumstances, and of course, they're also waiting as we are to see what are the actual numbers, where is the actual gap that we're looking at before committing to appropriating any additional funds from ARPA towards that budget gap. That said, the ARPA funds are one-time funds from the federal government. And I know the residents of the city have made it clear to the council that they want to see the city advance on certain projects and initiatives. So the council will have to prioritize and decide between advancing and allocating, appropriating funds towards projects and initiatives that the city, residents of the city have requested, versus using those funds to fill budget gaps, considering in light of the fact that these are one-time funds that the city likely will not see any time in the near future.
Thank you.
Sara, I think you had a question.
Yeah, see, when you're doing a budget, library was supporting museums, wings and waves, or so many things. Now we are not supporting that. So is that cost will be reduced in your budget, or is that fund will help in other resources?
Yeah, actually those, that you're referring to the museum passes program, Sara? Yeah, that's actually a county-wide program. And that's, the good news is that's budgeted by the Washington County Cooperative Library Services. And that program was just reinitiated for the first time since the pandemic. And I'm not sure, I'll check, because I'm not sure off the top of my head whether or not the Museum Pass program will be continued. I'm making a note to myself in fiscal year 23. I'll reach out to the county library cooperative manager to inquire and get back to the board on that.
So thank you.
All right, Glenn, I had a question. How did the contingency funds get burned down during the pandemic, and what's the procedure for filling them back up again?
The contingency funds, I think we came in this year's budget, I don't remember the exact amount, but what essentially happens is that as we go through the budget year, those funds get used for when we make supplemental budget requests, if we have shortfalls in the budget or things come up that we didn't anticipate. And so the contingency fund is a place that we go to fill those gaps, or if we have increases in various unanticipated increases in costs. And then the biggest impact to our contingency fund rather, and that impacts our beginning working fund balance, is the cost of living increases, the contracted cost of living increases and step increases, which impact our contingency fund and our beginning working capital. So those are the two main reasons for why our contingency fund balance tends to go down over time. Some cases it goes up, and there have been years where our revenues, tax revenue, actually exceeded the budgeted amount. Unfortunately, this year is not one of those. But there have been instances in which our contingency fund actually increases over time.
All right, thanks, Glenn.
I didn't receive the budget copy. Is it shared with us?
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat that, please?
I didn't receive the budget documentation. Did you share it with us?
The budget documentation?
Yeah.
Sure. Let me pull that up.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go. Ready? So let me try a different file. That one's a little hard to read. Oh, actually, you know what? I even have an even better version, a PDF version. Let me pull that up. That's much easier to read.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now that I have that up, I can share my screen. Okay. Can you all see that?
Could you zoom in a little bit?
Yep. Okay. So I warn you, it's about 20 or so pages. Actually more, it's 34 pages. So basically this is our line item and justifications, or line item as submitted. As I mentioned, that was January the 28th. And since Beaverton uses what's called a program budget, which breaks down the departmental budget by various programs. And so currently the library has 4 program areas: administrative services, community engagement, which includes collections, public services, and materials. So, when this is actually a report that was produced from the city's budget software. And so when producing the report, it goes in the program order. So for example, at the very top, it starts off with, well, actually begins with personnel services. It goes through all of those costs. And then lists all of those costs and then follows them with the justifications, which essentially means what they're for. So here's library director, administrative assistant, program coordinator, et cetera. Then our managers, their division librarians, et cetera. Includes things like medical and dental benefits, retirement benefits, payroll, taxes and benefits, et cetera. And then it looks at the individual line items. So for example, in the specific objects or numbers, special department supplies, computer equipment, software, travel, et cetera. And takes them in program order. So beginning with administrative services. So for example, when we budget for travel, training, and subsistence, we do that for the library as a whole. We don't break it down by individual program, but we do it for the library as a whole. So last year, we submitted a request in a budgeted amount that was $20,000. And because we were asked to come in at or below last year's level, so if you look over here, our budgeted amount is the same, $20,000. Okay.
So this year or the past year, you have been providing the printer service free of cost, where we are not paying, members are not paying. So is it affects you? Is it anything that costs you more, or anything needs to be included in?
Are you referring to the training budget in particular, Sara?
No. I'm talking about the printing.
Oh,
yeah, you can.
Printing costs.
Yes, because you were not charging right now, yes, for the printing.
Correct. Yeah, so that's a good point. So actually, we have a couple areas of our revenue that are down compared to previous years.
Yeah.
One of them is fine revenue. If you recall, a year ago, February, this month actually, Washington County Cooperative Library Services, all member libraries, we went fine free. And so that resulted in about a $65,000 decrease in our revenue. Similarly, during the pandemic, we stopped charging for printing costs to the public. that's a much lesser amount, it's about $10,000. So overall though, when you look at our budget, which is about $12 million, those costs, to use Victoria's phrase earlier in this meeting, they're really de minimis. And so, but you're right. We're that is impacting our bottom line. Our revenues are down, and so consequently, and one of the things I wanted to share with the board is in just scrolling through other line items so you get a sense of what they are. Is for this fiscal year and probably the next, because it's probably going to take a good couple of years before the city is able to recoup their costs and see the revenue get back to previous levels, is we're probably going to have to increase our reliance on funds from external sources, such as the Friends and the Foundation. So Cathy, I was really pleased when you reported that the Friends have had their best year ever, because we're really going to need, you know, that level of support from them to help us fill some of our gaps when it comes to things like program costs. Potentially, we might even approach them for assistance with our training budget. Because our two biggest buckets, frankly, when you look at the library's budget, and here I'll scroll down to in 555, which is our community engagement and collections budget. That's where our materials budget lies. That's what we use to pay for books and other materials. So a couple of years ago, the library materials budget was at its height in recent years at a budgeted amount of $610,000. This year's budget was, if memory serves, came in at, I believe it was $475,000 or $435,000. So that was a significant reduction. So our two biggest buckets when it comes to the library fund, as Patrick likes to point out, our finance manager, is our personnel costs, which is about 95% of our costs, which is no different than any other city department. Personnel costs are always going to be your largest cost. And our materials budget. So this year we put in for, same as last year, $475,000. Interlibrary loan, we're probably still in 552. I wish there were a faster way to get to this, but the way the report breaks it down, it doesn't identify the program. Oh, here it is, program 553. Okay, that's the old circulation department. So we have to jump ahead 2 programs to get to that. 310, here we go. So now we're in program budget 555, which is community engagement, which includes collections. So library materials, that's the object name for that, is oh, this is, I'm sorry, this is 554. It used to live in 554. That's why it's here, and it doesn't appear in 2021 and 2022. Not that it went away, it just got transferred to 555, I'm sorry. Let's just skip ahead. Yeah, here is still in 554, which is public services. And okay, here we are. Now we're in 555, library, community engagement, which includes collections. So this year's budgeted amount, as I mentioned, is $475,000. This is what we spent to date. We anticipate we'll spend the full amount. And then for next year's proposed budget, we put in the same amount. Now, again, depending on where we're at in terms of our contingency budget, we may very well need to cut further into our library materials budget. And then it's in doing so though, it's a real balancing act, because if you cut too much of the library's materials budget, then we're not going to have enough books and other materials. Not only are we not going to have enough books and materials to put on the shelves, but even the prior step to that, we're not going to have enough books and materials coming through the pipeline to keep our staff fully occupied who perform the cataloging and the processing work. So there's a fine line and there's a balancing act when it comes to any reductions that we might suggest to our materials budget, because that could also have an impact on our personnel budget, because it's our cataloging and our processing staff, and also the staff who make the selections of those materials that could be impacted. So that's something that we'll want to look at very closely when it comes to any reductions that we might need to make. So the first step will, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at holding off on either filling or delays in when we fill any vacant positions. So between that and some cuts that we might be able to make to our materials budget, hopefully will be enough so that we don't have to make any reductions in our staff. But that would be a last step, last gap effort. The last time the city did that, and Kristen, correct me if I'm mistaken, was during the recession of 2009. And hopefully,
that's correct. Yeah.
And hopefully it won't come down to that. But should that happen, my understanding is when it comes to making those cuts per contract with the union as part of the collective bargaining agreement, those folks who have seniority in the library have what's known as bumping rights. And so that's a process that just something else to be aware of when it comes to, should the need arise to make any reductions in our force, that would come into play when it comes to how that is initiated.
Okay, thank you.
So I wish I had better news to share on the budget. At this point in time, we did what we were requested to, and that is come in at or below last year's levels. As I mentioned, we'll have a better idea in the coming weeks exactly where we stand and what additional changes, reductions we may need to make in order to meet our contingency fund requirement. Then again, for all I know, it's possible that the city council might vote to say, under the circumstances, instead of requiring a two-month contingency fund balance, we're only going to require a 1 month. And that's something that the city council would have to vote for. It's something that I, as director of the library, would certainly push for before we actually begin to look at, laying off any staff. But ultimately, that decision is the council's to make.
Okay. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah.
I hope the budget gets approved as you desire.
Thank you. We do too. So I want to do a time check. We have 10 minutes left. I haven't even gotten to the director's report. We also have, Kristen, do we also have comment cards too, correct?
We do, yeah.
So Andrew, I leave it up to you how you'd like to spend the remaining time that we have.
I just wanted to ask you that question about us presenting, because that might come up as to an agenda item for next time. Have we received any specific date or feedback from the city?
Okay. Did you reach out to Cathy then in the recorder's office?
I did not.
Okay. So I'd be happy to do that. I'll add that as a note to Ray presentation, because what we heard for the rest of the board from Lenny Parr, who is the manager of the city's boards and commissions, is that with respect to an annual presentation, a report by this board to the city council, which is something that this board has done on an annual basis. According to Lanny, it's really up to this board when to do so. There's really no fixed date and time. Then she also referred us to Cathy Jansen, who is the city recorder, who could advise us on when are the best times, the best months of the year to make those presentations. There's certain times of the year when it's better than others, when the board is I suppose less busy than others. So I will reach out to Cathy and inquire from her when are some, in her opinion, some good dates to do that. And then once I have that information, I'll share that with Andrew for dissemination to the rest of the board. Does that sound like a good approach?
Yes, and then we can put it on the agenda and prep ahead of time once we know when we'll want to do it. All right.
Okay.
And then so far as the rest of the meeting, do you have any things that'll stale from the director's report that if we don't hear this month, they won't be relevant anymore?
Yeah, let me check, Andrew. I think there are probably a couple items that fall into that category.
And then the rest would get pushed to the following next month.
Yeah. Oh, one thing is we are hoping to apply for a Library Services and Technology Act grant, which is a federally funded grant to pay for a bookmobile, mini bookmobile, and outreach services staff member. That will actually be going before the city council next week for their approval to apply for the grant. And the reason for that is because it obligates the city, potentially obligates the city, because we're asking for funds for a limited duration outreach specialist staff member, and then hoping that the city will see fit to fund that position after the funding period ends. So that will go on the consent agenda for next week's city council meeting. Another big item is that the governor has announced that the state intends to lift the mask mandate by, if not before, March 31st, depending on how quickly the case and hospitalization counts go down. And that obviously could have implications on city-owned buildings, including the library, with respect to masking policy. And the city will look to the state and local health officials for guidance on what to do. No timeline yet on when that announcement might be happening. And then anything else that's timely in a timely fashion. One more last item is that the city manager has launched a citywide organizational scan conducted by an external management consultant to audit the city's existing organizational structure and make recommendations for improved efficiency and productivity. That said, there are specific areas of the city that the audit, that the organizational scan will be looking at, in particular, including the city services and engagement, the city manager's office and public works. The good news is the library department is not one of those areas that the city is looking to scrutinize. They've been informed, city manager has been informed that we've undergone some organizational changes in the last year, and they are confident that those changes have well positioned the library to serve the public. So I don't anticipate any significant impact to the library organizational structure as a result of the scan, which should be completed sometime in late spring or early summer.
All right, perfect. we're a couple minutes in. Do we have time to do comment cards? Just to close it out?
We have 4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay, so I guess we'll fly through those comment cards. Does anybody want to read one of them?
Yeah, I can go.
Go for it, Sara.
Love Sara Mackenzie Read Aloud Revival book selection. She had a great holiday and monthly rec sections as well. I'm a childcare provider who is looking for wholesome children books, holiday books, educational books, geared for 2 to 5 years old set. While my family is complete racial, we do not promote CRT and see it as diversity. We are Christian. We do not like to see attitudinal stuff in books, words like boring, stupid, and dumb, and things I do not want introduced to young children. By the way, I just love the Mary Shaw's brand, and the people are very nice and helpful.
Okay, I don't think there's any action we have to take on that. Sounds like she likes the library. Someone want to read the next paragraph? Go for it, Mei.
Upstairs, lights are off on tables that are neated and some are turned off early, 20 minutes early on January 19th, right where people are sitting. At the same time, lights are on in rooms we can't use and no downstairs and no nights long. Please leave lights on where people need to sit and work. Yeah.
Glenn, I don't know if those lights are turning off to try and remind people to leave or how that works.
Yeah, we're going to investigate that, Andrew. And one thing about the comment about lights being left on is we did investigate that with our sustainability analyst recently and discovered that unfortunately, many of the rooms are on the same switch. So if we want to turn off the lights in a room that's not being used, that means we have to turn off lights in a room that is being used, unfortunately. So, but we'll explore, and as we do with all the comment cards, and follow up and as appropriate to make any necessary changes.
All right, I'll go quick through the next two since they're just sentences. Beth is great, awesome personality, personable. So I guess Beth should get a thumbs up. And then I would like to bring back the Korean newspaper. I don't know if you have a big demand for that one, but there you go. Cathy, do you want to read the last one?
Sure. Homeless rude man is intimidating staff. The staff is very kind and helpful, but a man was allowed to sleep at a terminal head down as he made strange comments and grumbles, moaning, etc. When the staff member came up to see what was going on, the sleeping man said in a hostile tone, "If you touch me, I'll," mumble as if he's threatening violence. This tolerance is going to lead to more bad behavior. Please request a security guard. The library staff should not be subject to abuse of the citizens. I have video footage.
I think the library does have 2 people that are for that purpose.
Well, as a matter of fact, our library building monitor positions are currently vacant. That said, staff, all staff who interact with the public receive extensive training on how to manage a variety of interactions and have continued to receive those trainings over the years, including de-escalation tactics and ongoing trainings. And so, this is a situation where perceptions differ with respect to, what constitutes hostile and what constitutes a threat of violence. And I can just tell you that the library staff are well trained, and we've also added a couple supervisors recently to assist our frontline staff in addressing situations appropriately. And so we'll follow up on that particular request, but just know that the library staff are well trained and well supported in responding to a variety of incidents. And of course, if the a particular situation escalates beyond the point where we're able to adequately respond to it, then we're very quick to call in the assistance from the police or other first responders. We have a very good relationship with them. Their response time is also outstanding. And so we do periodically get comments from individuals who see situations that causes them alarm and concern. But I just want you, the members of this board, to know that we take all those situations seriously. As I mentioned, we have provided extensive training for our staff in how to respond to those situations. We're very quick to respond to them. I just want you to know that, believe that as a result of that training and the staff that we have in place, we are well equipped to respond to the vast majority of those situations. And those that we can't, we have our colleagues, first responders, whether they be the police or EMTs, that are very quick to respond to incidents as they arise. So I just want to make sure that this board knows that we have policies, procedures, trainings in place to respond to those situations, and that we understand that in some cases, I'll give you an example to where I'm going with this, and I know we're a little over time, but I think it's an important point to make, is that sometimes the mere presence of an individual who appears to be homeless is upsetting to someone, to the point where they assume that this person is going to be violent merely by their very appearance. And so as part of their training, staff are trained to recognize situations that have the potential for turning violent. And so, and assessing those situations and responding accordingly. Most members of the public, they haven't received that training. So when they see a situation that they think is a dangerous situation, it may not be as it appears to be. So I just want this board to understand that we're trying to create an environment where everyone feels safe and everyone feels welcome, including members of our community who are houseless, whose appearance may be unsettling to some, just as the appearance of some books on our shelves are unsettling to some. So too with members of the public who enter our doors. We cannot guarantee that everyone that you encounter in the library, or every book or other material that you encounter in the library is going to meet your standards. But what we do try to ensure is and provide is a safe and welcoming place for everyone who enters our doors.
Thanks, Glenn. So the only thing I'd be real interested to hear from the staff member, or if they didn't even see it as a problem to report, just to confirm, if the staff member didn't see it as an issue and they've had the training, then the member of the public might have seen something that isn't really a concern. So that'd be the only thing, is if the staff member also escalated this, that would be something for the library to take attention on. But if the staff thought it was no problem, then that's fine.
Right, and then in that case, if the staff felt that it rose to the level of what we call an incident, then we have procedures in place for how we deal with those and how we document those. And so I don't recall, by the way, and I see a copy of every incident report that is submitted whenever there is a situation rises to the level of an incident. I do not recall coming across an incident report that described a situation similar to the one mentioned in the comment card. So my guess is that the library staff member handled the situation as they deemed appropriate, and it didn't rise to the level of what we consider to be a quote unquote incident.
That's great. All right, I'll read the last one. It's quick. Librarian, can you please get me more Transformer books? So that's a request, I assume, from a child, but it could be from anybody, that apparently you need more Transformer books.
Okay, we'll get right on that.
All right. I know we're a few minutes over, but is there anything else anyone would like to bring up or put on the agenda for next time before we close out?
Yeah, update on the branch that is going to be built in Cooper Mountain. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I will be sure to provide an update for this board. There's really no information to share today, Sarah, but hopefully next month I'll have some additional information on that, because I think there is a meeting coming up soon to talk about next steps in that process.
Okay, perfect. So we'll talk about Cooper Mountain next month. Anything else? All right, then I guess
I have one more about the conference room in the library. Update about the conference rooms in the library. How it's going.
Oh, I can tell you that right now. Thank you. Because I learned that earlier today. The city manager indicated that the meeting rooms in the library will remain closed to the public through June 30th. However, city-sponsored events, whether it be the library, other city departments, and events with partners like the Friends of the Library, for example, will still be able to make use of those spaces, but not members of the public.
Okay. Sarah, do you have anything else? All right, anyone else? Mei, Cathy? All right, then in that case, I call this meeting of the Library Advisory Board closed at 7:38 p.m. I'll see you all next month.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Kristen.